for energized discussion concerning issues at the micro and macro levels of society. 2 panel discussions will be held at this conference over the next 2 days. The panel discussion on the first day is titled Building Resilience Among Marginalized Groups. This panel discussion aims to throw light on how disadvantaged people living in poverty can develop resilience through their lived experiences, overcome social exclusion and rejection, and gain stability in their lives. The panel discussion on the second day is titled Funding Agencies and NGOs. This panel discussion brings together researchers, church leaders, public sector members, and NGOs interested in community transformation and nation building. To assist us in achieving the conference goals, papers for parallel presentations are in 3 categories: business, education, and welfare. Additionally, there will be 7 workshops. These workshops will target health, conflict management, education, and resilience amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The conference will also feature Mondragon from Spain. This is the largest cooperative in the world. We have approximately 298 persons registered. The conference has attracted researchers and participants from the Caribbean, as well as other countries such as Canada, the Philippines, Nigeria, Ghana, United Kingdom, Spain, India, and several others. We hope that networking will occur in this online conference despite the COVID-19 virus, and that collaborative research partners will emerge from this conference to facilitate innovative projects in community transformation. The organizers of this conference and the Caribbean Journal of Education publishers have agreed on the publication of a special issue that will feature keynote addresses and selected research from this conference. On behalf of the Planning Committee, we welcome our keynote speakers, panelists, workshop facilitators, and participants. We wish you a memorable and productive conference. Thank you. Possible speech.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lorraine. All protocols observed. It is our pleasure to welcome you to this conference, Moving Research Beyond Academics, Transforming Societies Through Collaboration and Action. Over the last decade, the School of Education and Operation Save Jamaica have collaborated on multiple training projects, webinars, and a symposium. The training projects and the symposium all aim to improve the quality of education provided to under-resourced communities. Our last conference produced a special issue of the Caribbean Educational Journal. This conference hopes to show the validity of research, local and international, in using evidence-based practice in helping to bring solutions to several of our intractable problems in our society, while recognizing there is a need for collaboration and engagement of various stakeholders. If we're going to have action that will bring about significant change, one perspective that there are many organizations, foundations which are doing good work, but perhaps they could become more impactful if there were universities who helped to undertake the burden of research to enhance or sharpen their outcomes. The question which begs an answer is, could there be more coordinated approach to intervention and community transformation with other stakeholders for greater stewardship of resources and mileage? In Jamaica, where there are many inner city communities with diverse challenges, where violent crimes are prevalent, it will be important to partner with the university so as to conduct research to support and guide interventions in these communities. Operation Save Jamaica believes that through strategic partnership, complex issues in our communities and nation can be addressed. Our position is that there needs to be a framework which facilitates the smooth, seamless cooperation between various stakeholders, which will promote an efficient, effective, and comprehensive approach to solving our difficult problems in the various nations. While we celebrate the emancipation from slavery of the people of Jamaica and the Caribbean, our inner city communities still need to be emancipated from the entrenched culture of violence. This necessitates a multi-level approach to addressing the systemic barriers that often prevent troubled communities from prospering. We hope that this conference will help to foster a targeted, sustained, and strategic partnership of all the stakeholders of our nation, such as policymakers, national security providers, schools and universities, financial institutions and their foundations, businesses, churches, and NGOs, where these communities may become places where people can live in peace, work, raise a family, and do business. In this conference, we will hear from researchers, persons from different walks of life and sectors of the society. We also will be exposed, as was mentioned before, to an organization called Mondragon. And we're hoping to benefit from their history and model and experience. We trust that this conference will add to the voices that have already been speaking out to this end of evidence-based interventions being executed through strategic partnership, but also move us into our various nations from talk and spotted interventions to massive collaboration action. So we want to say action, but it is evidence-based. And so we want to welcome everyone once again to this conference. We want to see a movement that will encourage persons in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, and across the world. Have a great conference, and God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Fletcher, for your greetings today. And I would now like to invite Mrs. Joanna Simpson, doctoral student at the Department of Government, UWI Mona, to introduce our keynote speaker today. Mrs. Simpson?
Yes. Good morning to all. Courtney Campbell is President and Chief Executive Officer of Victoria Mutual, a leading Jamaican financial group with operations that extend to major financial districts in North America and the United Kingdom. Courtney assumed this position in April 2016 and immediately went about igniting a transformation of the organization, which includes an ambitious digital strategy that has led to new products and services being delivered in modern, convenient ways. Courtney has leveraged the organization's cultural beliefs and core values to kindle the VM's team's passion for uplifting Jamaicans. He's a strident advocate for greater financial inclusion, which is a founding purpose of VM, and a significant motivator behind the work that he does. Before joining VM, Courtney had already established an enviable record of success in several senior executive roles, including that of CEO of Grace Kennedy Financial Group. He also spent over 23 years with the National Commercial Bank, serving in various management positions, including head of the retail banking division and other roles instrumental to the bank's success. He holds a bachelor's in management studies from the University of the West Indies and an MBA in finance distinction, jointly awarded by the University of Wales and Manchester Business School. He's also a member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, London. Courtney is a director of Victoria Mutual Building Society and all its subsidiaries, as well as associate company British Caribbean Insurance Company. He is also chairman of the VM Foundation and the United Church Mission Enterprise. Courtney is a corporate champion for the UWI Stat, Mona Campus, and serves on the Governor General Jamaica Trust and the Investment Committee of the Council of World Missions. He's a former chairman of the National Education Trust, a Justice of the Peace. Courtney is an advisory board member of the Governor General's Program for Excellence and an I Believe Initiative ambassador. He's married to Pauline and they have 2 sons. Thank you.
I think you're muted. You're muted.
Am I?
He's on. Muted. It seems as if still not hearing.
Okay, are you hearing me now? Is this better?
Yes, perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. All right, sorry about that. So thank you very much, Joanna. Conference managers, Dr. Lynn Keith and Dr. Ingrid Hunt Anderson, Dr. Marcia Rainford, Director of the UI's Mona School of Education, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Stephen Gift, Right Reverend Dr. Gordon Cohens, my own moderator, the moderator of the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, presenters, panelists, participants, good day to you all. Congratulations to the teams from UI's School of Education and Operation Save Jamaica, led by the visionaries, Dr. Lorraine Cook and Pastor Bruce Fletcher, for conceptualizing and staging this conference. And thanks for the honor and the privilege of sharing some thoughts with you. I'm really very impressed by the fusion of academic researchers, stakeholders, and practitioners united in the search for solutions. I think it's an excellent move to invite the Mondragon Group to participate. I've read about them and their work, and I'm confident that they will make an invaluable contribution to your deliberations. This is a most timely engagement, and I hope that the discussions will be rich and will lead to groundbreaking decisions and innovative actions for the benefit of the Caribbean region. This conference is happening during a period of great stress for Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. Before COVID-19, we were struggling with the impact of climate change, high indebtedness, globalization, and its varied complications. And then, according to a recent IMF article, and I will quote the IMF, due to their small size and limited room for maneuver, Caribbean economies were among the most affected by the pandemic, with annual hotel stays plummeting by 70%, and the cruise ship travel completely halted. Tourism-dependent countries contracted by 9.8% in 2020 on average. Commodity exporters in the region, for example, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and Guyana, were less affected and saw a mild contraction of 0.2%, unquote. So no doubt we're in the midst of a tremendous challenge. As we all know, however, in every challenge, there are opportunities. And it is incumbent on all of us who desire a better tomorrow to be thoughtful in our approach to recovery so that our rebound will be strong and meaningful. As we in the Caribbean recover and rebuild our economies from this crisis, let us not rebuild using the same flagging structures with which we have struggled for so long. Let us instead build some new, sturdy houses that reflect more sustainable, inclusive economic systems and harmonious societies. So friends, let us consider Jamaica, because that's the nation I'm most familiar with. There are so many positive features to this great nation. Regrettably, however, we have suffered from a high rate of violent crime for many decades. With over 1,300 killings recorded in 2020, a new report on Latin America and the Caribbean has revealed that Jamaica now has the region's highest homicide rate at 46.5 per 100,000 people. According to the United Nations, any homicide rate of 10 per 100,000 citizens or above is considered an epidemic. So the many causes of this crime epidemic have been well researched and documented. People much more qualified than I am have written about the income and gender inequalities, the dysfunctional families, the lack of law enforcement, corruption, and weak institutions. For example, UWI Professor Anthony Harriott and Marilyn Jones in a 2010 paper for the IDB quoted from the World Health Report on Violence and Health on the UN's 2002 crime prevention guidelines. And it outlined some crime prevention strategies and say that they require the following. One, developing safe, stable, and nurturing relationships between children and their parents and caregivers, developing life skills in children and adolescents, reducing access to guns, knives, and poisons, promoting gender equality to prevent violence against women, changing cultural and social norms that support violence, and implementing victim identification, care, and support programs. Given what we have experienced in recent years, our responses to this epidemic have fallen woefully short of what is needed. So as you deliberate over the next few days in the context of the need to rebuild from the global pandemic and to chart a path out of the local crime epidemic, I invite you to consider some specific types of transformation that we need in Jamaica and perhaps the wider Caribbean. So the first one I'd like to propose is that we need a transformation in education. Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. He also said the power of education extends beyond the development of skills we need for economic success. It can contribute to nation building and reconciliation. Before COVID-19, Jamaica's economy suffered from low rates of productivity and high income inequality. According to the Jamaica Productivity Center, Jamaica has the lowest labor productivity when compared to other Caribbean countries such as Barbados, Domrep, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, and so on. Over the last 2 decades, Jamaica has had weak and declining levels of productivity. From 2001 to 2019, labor productivity, capital productivity, and total factor productivity recorded annual average declines of 0.6, 0.2, and 0.4 respectively. So one reason for the low productivity is the low availability of some of the skills required to be globally competitive in this era. And COVID-19 has in fact accelerated technology adoption in all sectors. So these talent-related challenges have become even more pronounced. If your company or your country cannot claim a ready pool of these digital skills, you will be left behind. And the income inequality has been exacerbated by permanent and temporary losses of employment and income. So friends, to address these issues, we will have to help our people identify and transition to new labor market opportunities supported by revised labor market policies. We must also invest in reskilling and upskilling programs. In 2018, the Victoria Mutual Group devised an ambitious digital transformation program. And the main goal of this program is to move from doing digital to being digital by infusing digital technologies into all of VM's key business processes. However, to be able to do this well, we have had to ensure that our people develop critical digital skills that allow them to thrive not only in a digital workspace, but also in the new digital world. As such, an entire pillar of our digital strategy is dedicated to digital capabilities building, with focus on skills such as design thinking, customer journey mapping, data analysis, agile methodologies, Scrum, Lean, Black Belt, DevOps. And our people have also adopted to remote collaboration. We have invested in a digital collaboration platform to enable the shift to this new paradigm. And even more importantly, we have a continuous training program designed to help our team capitalize on the benefits of the platform for greater productivity while working remotely. It cannot be overemphasized how important it is for educational institutions to recognize the importance of focus on these types of new digital skills. They are now skills for survival. And our labor market requires this upskilling. And it is imperative that we advance and embed these new skills in our nation's educational system. So for the post-COVID world, business leaders and legislators will need to consider new labor market practices, regulations, and laws to support the new normal. But friends, as we rebuild, we will need your collective wisdom, specifically on how we should update the education curricula and expand investment in the skills needed for jobs in the markets of tomorrow. Please share your thoughts on how our labor laws should be updated to better serve the more inclusive and sustainable Jamaican and Caribbean economies of the future. But there's another long-standing challenge in our education system that demands transformation, and that is the gross inequality in our secondary schools. Based on outcomes, only 25% of our just over 160 high schools are performing at the level required to properly prepare our young people for a prosperous future. In the other 75% of schools, only 2 of every 10 students pass at least 5 CSEC subjects, including English and mathematics. As a result, only 19% of Jamaicans aged 19 to 24 are currently enrolled in tertiary education, and only 15% of the workforce has benefited from tertiary education. We are leaving behind too many of our talented young Jamaicans. And these are the potential data scientists, actuaries, engineers, bankers of the future. We're leaving them behind because of major and multifaceted weaknesses in our early childhood, primary, and secondary systems. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the investments required to transform this situation? How can we strategize to achieve an audacious goal that, say, in 15 years, at least 90% of our then 18-year-olds, and they were the 3 years old now, either that 90% of them either matriculate for tertiary education or obtain vocational certification. What if we set that audacious goal? The good news is that the government of Jamaica in March 2020 appointed a Jamaica Education Transformation Commission headed by Professor Orlando Patterson. Please share your thoughts with them, because we desperately need transformation in education. But we also need a transformation of our culture. If we analyze Jamaican culture through the lens of Hofstede's 6B model, Jamaica is ranked extremely low on uncertainty avoidance. Jamaica scores 13 out of 100 on this dimension, and thus has low preference for avoiding uncertainty. Low UA societies maintain a more relaxed attitude in which practice counts more than principles, and deviance from the norm is generally more easily tolerated. In societies exhibiting low uncertainty avoidance, people believe that there should be no more rules than are absolutely necessary, and if they are ambiguous or do not work, they should be abandoned or changed. Schedules are flexible. Hard work is undertaken when necessary, but not for its own sake. And precision and punctuality do not come naturally. Innovation is not seen as strength. Does any of that sound familiar?
Yes.
So
I have my video on.
So Professor Patterson, in his book, The Confounding Island, points out that not enough has been done to address the socio-cultural factors impacting our high crime rate over the years. How can we effectively address the low regard for rules, the indiscipline, the blight culture? We must reject warped values that would see people who promote violence and hate in their music become the heroes of our young people. So can a national culture be transformed? What types of interventions have worked in other countries? And on an organizational level, VM has been successfully pursuing a culture transformation program. And this program is based on our realization that either you manage your culture or it will manage you. Culture can make the difference between success and failure. Culture produces results. Your organization's culture determines your results, and the results you want should largely determine the kind of culture you need, say our consultant partners in leadership. So we're managing the organizational culture so that all leaders and team members think and act in the manner necessary to achieve the desired results reflected in our bold vision. Because we know as the leaders of VM that we have the responsibility of shifting this culture. In many important ways, VM is being successfully transformed. And a big driver of that transformation is a transformation of our culture into one that is characterized by greater ambition, urgency, collaboration, and ownership. So one might say that, you know, you may be able to transform the culture of a 142-year-old institution with 800 team members, but it is impossible to transform a national culture. I say that it may be more difficult, but it may take much longer, but it is not impossible. As Mandela says, it always seems impossible until it's done. Across many nations and ethnicities, it has been proven that culture impacts socio-economic outcomes. So culture also produces results on a national scale. Can't we then agree the type of society we would like to live in, the results, and agree the values that Jamaicans would need to display, or we would influence and incentivize people to think and act in order for us to achieve those results? Should aspects of this desired culture be reflected in the curricula of our education system? Should we be teaching character education and placing greater emphasis on life skills? How can we train our boys to respect women? How do we teach our people to value human life? Parenting is a privileged but difficult job. So could we teach our young people some foundational parenting skills so that all Jamaican 18-year-olds would be aligned around a few parenting must-dos? This way, even if they don't ever become parents themselves, they can be great uncles and aunts and godparents. How could academia, business, and community and policymakers forge a unique partnership to research and shape national culture transformation, perhaps starting with some communities? And then finally, we need a transformation of governance. Jamaica is a low trust society. If we're going to transform our communities, we need to close the wide trust deficit that is all pervasive. On December 1, 1862, in his annual message to Congress, President Abraham Lincoln said these words, and I think they're so powerful for us today. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. In March 2021 in Jamaica, we need some new thinking and new actions in how we approach leadership in our beloved country. Everything rises and falls on leadership. We need leaders, institutions, and governance practices in all sectors that inspire rather than undermine trust. If we're going to realize the bold vision that we have for this country to be the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business, we will need to strengthen many of our key institutions. Transparency International publishes an annual corruption perception index. And according to TI, a score of 0 means the country is perceived to be very corrupt, while 100 means the country is perceived to be clean. And they assess 100 countries. And in 2020, they scored Jamaica at 44, ranked 69th in the world, and we're perceived to be the 5th most corrupt state in the Caribbean. So persistent transparency gaps affect citizens' trust in institutions. And it is important that citizens trust the institutions of government. So I propose that we need to overhaul the running of many government agencies to ensure that they practice the best governance principles and deliver service that is just and equitable for all citizens, including those in our inner cities. All communities should have their garbage collected on schedule. All communities should feel that the planning and environmental authorities are acting with transparency. There needs to be greater accountability in how public bodies report to the people on their stewardship. Information on the Office of the Cabinet's website indicates that only one of 164 public bodies and agencies was current in its annual reports, according to the latest information that was published in September of 2018. So we need to change the process for appointing boards and leadership of certain key institutions. And there are good examples for us to follow right here in Jamaica. Last year, Parliament passed the Bank of Jamaica Amendment Act that paves the way for modernization of our central bank. And that work benefited from the work of a that legislation rather benefited from the work of a joint select committee of both houses of parliament. And you know what? They have passed now that act. It will come into effect in April of this year. And some important things to highlight: that they will have full-fledged inflation targeting to be the clear mandate of the central bank, to the first public institution in Jamaica with staggered board appointments, such that the entire board cannot be replaced in a single political administration. So it provides long-term institutional stability. And the BOJ governor will account to the people of Jamaica in the parliament through regular appearances before the Standing Finance Committee. So the question for us is this: shouldn't these modern governance principles be applied to other public institutions? Is it only our inflation management and the financial sector that deserve this transparency and these pillars of trust? Could you help us to identify even 5 other institutions that would benefit from similar governance arrangements in our efforts to better serve all our citizens as we go forward in the transformation of our nation? This is what transformational leadership is about: bringing people together and making all feel respected. So Michelle Obama said, people who are truly strong lift others up. People who are truly powerful bring others together. As you deliberate over the next 2 days, I encourage you to think about how we can transform our communities by raising up powerful leaders who bring people together. Let us transform education. Let us transform our culture. Let us transform governance and build trust. Let us, community by community, transform Jamaica. Have an engaging and highly productive conference.
Fantastic.
Mr. Campbell, thank you so much for that message. You have given us more than a mouthful to think about. I would describe it as a very comprehensive and in-depth, realistic picture of the social issues that we face, not only in Jamaica, but throughout certain parts of the world. And this is why we are here, as you said, to collaborate and to learn from each other. And your emphasis on the need for transformation, especially in the areas of education and timely, and with an emphasis on technology, of course, and digital platforms improvement, and the areas of financial resources to support those systems and productivity. And also, you spoke about the management of culture, which really touches a sensitive spot for me, because it's sort of relates back to some of my research. And so this is a very novel approach for me, something I think that we have overlooked a lot. And also your emphasis on governance, which, you said it needs to be results driven. There needs to be accountability and, of course, quality in leadership. So you're really giving us a lot to think about in terms of what are the dynamics of what is needed, the framework for building, for transformation, for taking that step towards good intervention and transformational outcomes, if we want to put it that way. So we really thank you this morning for what you have shared here. We've certainly gained a lot, and learned from you. Thank you so much. At this time, I would like to just take the opportunity to recognize one of our sponsors, Hawkeye Security Limited. Hawkeye, thank you for your support. And we are now going to lead off into a very interesting segment of our program, our first panel discussion. And let me see if I can just share that PowerPoint slide with you. Let's hope it's up. There it is. Is everyone seeing it? So our
Yes, we are.
panel discussions today, we have a very esteemed set of discussants here. And there are Miss Beverly Johnson, Reverend Dr. Stephen Jennings, Professor Emeritus Rupert Lewis, Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling, Roderick Robinson, and the Reverend Dr. Gordon Cowan, who is going to be our moderator for this discussion. And just to mention some things about Reverend Gordon Collins. He's a minister at the Scottskirk United Church, and he has initiated a number of programs which have served to enhance the life of the church and the community in general. He's also founder and trustee of the Inner City Development Trust and member of the National Advisory Council on Disability to the then Minister of Social Security. He's also the Caribbean coordinator of the Ecumenical Disability Advocates Network of the World Council of Churches, among other accolades that he has. These are just a few. So, you know, very, we're looking forward to the discussion at this time, led by our moderator, the Reverend Dr. Gordon Cowan. Let me take down this and over to Dr. Cowan.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I join you with the absolute joy of hearing Brother Courtney Campbell speak with such passion about such significant issues, and in fact, giving us a tremendous segue into this panel discussion of building resilience among marginalized groups. Because what Mr. Campbell has said has given us the basis on which a national aspiration can be the basis upon which marginalized groups can indeed be transformed, largely through the work from within. So without any further ado, really, this tremendous panel that you've gathered for the purpose will guide us. And we're going to begin with church's perspective brought to us from Reverend Dr. Stephen Jennings, when he reflects on building resilience among Caribbean people, having experienced and living in the legacies of slavery and colonization. Reverend Dr. Stephen Jennings is an ordained and accredited minister of the Jamaica Baptist Union, the church in which he is a past president. He is also pastor of the Mona Circuit of Baptist Churches in Kingston, Jamaica, and a part-time graduate lecturer, adjunct professor at the United Theological College of the West Indies, the UTCWI. We're very keen to hear his perspective, and this panel is going to be operated in a way that our presenters present. We get an opportunity to ask them some questions, and then hopefully there will be a genuine and generous discussion that will ensue. Reverend Dr. Jennings. I'm advised that just before Reverend Stephen Jennings comes on, we're going to receive a video from one of our panelists who is not present, but he has prepared a video for us. It is a video of the life experiences of Roderick Robinson. Now, who is Mr. Robinson? He's a graduate from the Bethel Bible College and a former student of Aberdeen all-age school. He was sent to prison 3 times in his teenage years and as an adult. In 1991, while in prison completing a 5-year sentence, he was introduced to the Lord, and that, he will tell us, changed his life. He has been in ministry for over 25 years and is involved in many aspects of the church's life among broken people, including prison ministry. He's a member of a group called Men of God Against Violence, Mogava. So this man of God, who is married and a father of 5 boys, gives us a life experience on which we are able to reflect, hopefully learn. Let's hear from a man who has experienced brokenness and who is contributing, showing resilience in life even now.
All right, good night, everyone. Our good day, I should say. Just want to share a little bit of my life story about my journey through life. It all started way back when I was in the country, growing up with my mom and my stepdad. I think life was very hard in the sense that my mom and my dad, they had about 10 of us. And I think it was very pressuring to take care of so many children. And not only that, me being an outside child, I think my stepdad at the time felt as if that wasn't his responsibility. So there were constant battle between me and him, and my mother got involved, and my sisters and so forth. And so at that point, I felt rejected and felt as if I was a cast out and or a child that is not welcoming in the family. At the time, I remember I couldn't read because my mother couldn't send me to school. A matter of fact, my mother tried to send me to school at one point, and that just didn't work out because she didn't know why she was sending me to school. I didn't know why I was going to school. So I ended up couldn't read. So I wanted to learn to read so badly. So I decided that I was going to come to Kingston, where I had some family members, to see if I could get the chance to learn to read. Well, I came to Kingston, that didn't work. Didn't get a chance to go to school either. So I ended up on the street, really taking up badness. I remember I was a part of a gang, and the guys that I remember used to move with at the time, we were just troublemaker, and we wanted to prove that we were bad because at the time, I mean, you're talking about a group of guys who didn't even have a father, so we wanted to feel important and to feel powerful. So we would get involved in fighting and shooting and all kind of things. It so happened that I ended up in prison a few times. The first time I remember I went to prison, I was like about probably 19 or 17, somewhere about there. Then I went back to prison at about age 20 something. And the last time I went to prison I was about 24, 25, somewhere about there. It was while I was in prison, I started to really look into myself. I mean, the first 2 times I went to prison, going to prison never really mean anything to me because for me, I went already, so I don't have a problem going back. But the last time when I went to prison for shooting with intent and illegal possession of a firearm, it was at that point I reached to the point where I said I was really tired of living this life over and over. So I wanted a change. So I remember I had a spiritual encounter, and I started to look into my life, and started to make some changes. And I remember at the time, after serving some time in prison, I was now released. The time came for me to be released, and there was this gentleman who I met in the prison. He was one of my spiritual coach at the time. He took me into his home to live because he thought that it was safe for me to go back in the community that I was involved in after release from prison. He thought that that was a good idea. So he took me in his home, and I lived with him for about 2 years with he and his family. Matter of fact, I lived there, and then I left, and I went back to where I was living before. I met my wife, the lady who is now my wife, Nadine, and we got married and we started to get children. But I think one of the driving force for me, one of the things that really challenged my life, why I said I really wanted a change and I'm not going back to prison. It was first that spiritual encounter that I had. And secondly, I started to learn to read because before I couldn't read. So I started to learn to read. And it was at that point my eyes started to open. The other thing that I think kept me and helped me to change my life is my family. I really wanted to be a good husband, and I really wanted to be a good father because I did not get that experience. I didn't have a father in my life. And so I thought that now is my time to give to, how should I put it now, to give to somebody what I didn't get from a man. So I really take the whole thing about family, taking care of my wife and my children. I really take those things seriously. And those things really motivate me. I remember before that, I was the person who believed in working. Now, because of my wife and my children, every day I am at work because I have to work and take care of my family.
One.
All right. So my encouragement for those who are listening to me now, whether you're the teacher or you're the business person or whatever is your position in our society, is to, try to help build someone. I would say to those who work in the academic field to continue to push for education. I don't consider myself a scholar, but I believe in education because I've seen where that changed my life. So I would encourage you to continue to push for education and teach those who you come across each time, whether it's in your classroom or those that you probably might come across each day. Teach them because people need to know, because when you don't know, I think that in itself is destructive. For those who are business people, I would encourage you to use your resources to help build a life the life that you build today or that you help today with your resources could be that life that might bring some change to Jamaica. And for those who probably are living in the inner city or wherever you are at, and probably you are in crime and so forth, what I would encourage you to do is, don't make the same mistake that your father made. Don't, try to have a changed life, and a changed life is possible. A changed life is possible. So just push for that. Take care of your family, take care of your children, because that child who you don't take care of, that child might be the one who helped wreck this country. You understand? That child might be the one who become the next gunman. So take care of your children, and I'm very passionate about that. You understand? I thank you all for listening to me and giving me listening ears. Have a good day, everyone. God bless you.
God bless you too. And thank you very much. That is the lived experience. And I heard you say a changed life is possible. And you are actually living it and openly sharing it with us, because this is not about other people. It is about how together we move as people to a better place. Thank you very much for that moving experience and your continuing experience of life. We're willing to put our ears to the ground to hear what does it tell us about what life can be for people who have had experiences like yours, or even now as we speak. Unfortunately, society may be generating and creating people with similar backstories as is yours. How do we bring about change? Change life is possible. Thank you, resilient man, father of 5 boys, doing a very important parenting work, and we heard your comments there. We're going to turn to Reverend Dr. Stephen Jennings, adjunct professor at UTCWI, past president of the Baptist Union in Jamaica. He brings a very special church perspective to this matter of resilience among ordinary people like ourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Cowens. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I wanted to share about transformation, and I was particularly intrigued by the comments of our presenter this morning. And I wanted to start by attempting to look at Jamaica's history at a big sweep, and then focus on 2 points of that history that I think we can learn lessons from for today. Now, I only have 7 to 10 minutes, so I'm going to make best use of it. I did send a PowerPoint. I hope it is ready. If it's not, then I will just have to speak to it and you will just have to follow. When we talk about community was created in Jamaica long before Europeans came. It is estimated that people that I will call First Nations people, the anthropologists have more technical names for them, settled in Jamaica from the very time that Jesus was born, and were present in Jamaica until Columbus and his crew came in 1494 to Jamaica. So we're talking about roughly 1,500 years of human settlement in Jamaica, and people created communities, villages and districts, and they had names for them. They related to each other. They had community councils, they had trading expeditions, etc. I want to say that because sometimes when we think of community, we think of it only in relation to when Europe came, but that would not be true. When Europeans came, led by Columbus, as we said, in 1494, they colonized community. In other words, they swept out the people that were there pretty much through various forms, genocide, disease, all kinds of other things. And in the end, impose a European civilization on form of civilization on the country. So towns and residences and names and places and economics and society on a whole were ordered for European exportation tastes. So Jamaica was a colony in the sense that it was not just settled by Europeans, but settled for Europeans and for people living in Europe and later on North America. Africans were brought in as slave labor, as we know, and later on Indians, Chinese, and so on as indentured servants. But the colonizing framework remained the same. And out of that, Europe was able to get its way in many, many things. Africans always resisted that and created their own communities within the strictures that they had. So people, for instance, were not allowed to marry or to rear their children past a certain point because they belonged to the masters. But people still tried to have family life anyway. People were not, except towards the end, allowed to do much trading and economic activity for themselves. But they tried anyway, to the point that they had Sunday markets and so on. By the time we reached 1834, when emancipation is formally given, although apprenticeship remained for 4 more years, we are dealing with the fact that Europe now has, and slavery was pushed back, and Africans and Europeans were joining together as church to form free villages that would now reform what community life was. And many people who come from rural Jamaica come from free villages. You know, places like Wattown, places like Liberty, places like Maidstone, places like even beside the University of Augustown, which was originally called First of Augustown. All of those places were free villages set up by church, but in a broader sense of touching society to try to reform community. Because even though people had been freed, famous in the words of a stipendiary magistrate of 1835, a society had not yet been formed. And so the church led into that formation of society. That experiment was successful. I mean, people started to move from abject poverty into peasantry, into a bigger space. So people are beginning to own property and trade and buy and sell and go to school and so on. But that experiment was short-lived because after 1865 and the uprisings, because of the injustices that we were facing, led by Paul Bogle and his brother Moses, that was crushed. That whole experiment was crushed. And while formally the free villages remained, the economic life was removed from it and given into bigger hands. So more plantations, albeit no banana plantations, came on the scene, for instance. Cities were developed and modernized, but villages were marginalized. And so a lot of people started to migrate from country to town, forming what became later known as inner cities during this period. We're talking about 1865 to 1944. And then also, people began to migrate outward, and a whole trend of people moving outward. Panama, Cuba, Costa Rica, United States of America, and the idea that you have to go foreign in order to make it became rooted during this period. 1944 to 1990 shows what I call nationalizing of community, where community is nationalized, and we become now people who are working for independence and self-determination, and political parties are formed, and their allies, trade unions, and the rest of it. I think that is fairly well known. And now from 1990 to now, we are dealing with what I call globalizing community, where community is not just we who are here, but people elsewhere or diasporas, and the fact that we are connected with other people and other places, and technology like what we're using now connects us to the world and the world to us. So community is not just one little fixed thing. It has evolved, changed, and continued. In my last few minutes, therefore, I want to revisit two areas. I believe that we need to look at the fact that, one, we need, if we're going to transform community, we need to update that free village model. That's the approach we need to take. We need to look at that. Because the free village model was a critical model. The church was in it, and therefore spirituality, morality, and theology was at the core of it, religion and all of that. But not just religious forms, but it's how do you approach life? How do you deal with things? How is God related to all of this? But it was related not just to religion, but to education, economics, politics, social life, cultural life. The free village model was a holistic model. If we're going to be serious about community transformation, we have to be holistic in our approach, with spirituality and theology and morality at the core of it, but touching all areas of life. Number two is that we need to look at what I call the attitude of justice, right? The attitude of justice, mercy, humility, compassion, solidarity. Those attitudes have to be recovered, because in a real sense, people were never ever given their fair shakes. And the idea of the free village model was attempting to say, these are human beings who should be fairly treated, who should be given opportunity to work and to serve and to be able to raise their families and all of that. It was justice and compassion, but a sense of solidarity that people were appealed to. And I think we have to do that, right? If we're going to build resilience. It's not just a matter of saying, why, we must be tough it out. People have to be given opportunity, and their attitudes have to be shaped, and people have to treat them fairly. Not as charity cases to be given a little change when you can, but for people to have opportunity to be empowered themselves. And that leads me to the last thing of the action that I need to be thinking is reparations. Reparations has to do with repairing the damage, healing the wound, and helping to bridge the gap between advantaged and disadvantaged people. That needs to happen internally within the country and externally outside of the country. Because one needs to bear in mind that when slavery was abolished, the slaveholding class got over 45 million pounds as compensation for loss of slaves. The people who were enslaved got nothing at all. One needs to remember too that when Jamaica ceased to become a colony, it got 1 million pounds. Yes? For all the 400 years of enslavement, it got 1 million pounds to start to become an independent nation, when everything was extracted from it. So the government successively have had to work with that 1 million pounds to try to do everything for the country, hospitals, schools, etc. We need to get that fixed. So reparations is a thing externally, but internally, how do we distribute things equally and with equity so that people can have opportunity to be empowered holistically with spirituality at the core of it, but touching every area of life. I think that would be what I want to say then. So in conclusion, we have to rebuild that which was destroyed. And we have to, in doing so, look at those areas that have been distorted and say, how can we repair the damage holistically with spirituality, morality, theology at the core, but touching all of life. Thank you very much for listening to me. Hope this helps.
It certainly helps. Thank you very much, Reverend Stephen, and thank you for that historical perspective and bringing the church's understanding. You bring a unique understanding, especially as a Baptist minister, to the business of where justice and the reparations movement should be at the heart of what we're talking about going forward. You know, sometimes the discussion gets into a kind of place like, why do we bother to look back? But when our keynote speaker spoke about having garbage collected in every community, every category of community. This is how I understood what he's saying, that if we're going to go forward, we must be going forward as a nation of justice. So we do have a work to do with the issue of justice, and then to bring the theme of community into our life experience with that kind of historical perspective, I think has been very useful. I want to just see if the technology will allow us to receive one or two questions from anyone who wants to just, raise a point with you, but for a brief response, and then we hear from the other panelists, and then we will come back to a more general conversation. Is there any question that is coming forward right now? Somebody who would be allowed to unmute and just interact with Brother Stephen just for one or two questions? Please raise your hand if there is such. I think the technology is trying to assist you. If you will raise your hand quickly, then Brother Stephen will hear. If we are not able to receive the questions right at this point, please just store the question, because we are going to have opportunities for interacting with our panelists. Just one more moment to see if there is a question that is being allowed, if the hand is being raised, the technology is being managed. Yes, please unmute.
Yes, I do have a question.
Welcome.
Thank you. Earlier on, the first speaker mentioned that the level of rethinking or shifting of paradigms should be at the national level.
Yes.
I personally believe that it should be at the international level.
Yes.
Because in the past, we were enslaved by a more powerful nation or nations. Similarly now, our enslavement is more of an intellectual nature, and it is still by an external legacy, so to speak. So rethinking and fighting this mental struggle, this spiritual struggle, yes, it must begin within the nation, and the nation has to be transformed, but it will really not achieve much until we can get a rethinking, not just on the national level, but on the international level. And indeed, the most effective tools and weapons are not coercive, but empathetic, if you want to call it that, or spiritual. They are the weapons that were used in South Africa when the Truth and Reconciliation movement sought not to accuse without forgiveness, but sought to accuse and forgive and then reconcile. How can we achieve this international shift in paradigm with a spirit of reconciliation and brotherhood or fraternity among all peoples, even the enslaver and the enslaved, who now seeks to be emancipated mentally and spiritually? That's my question.
Thank you, Brother Aiken. I think that's the dialogue we have to continue outside of this meeting. But I tell you what is important. It's already happening. There is dialogue going on at several levels. But I think there's need for more, because there's still people who don't see that they have done anything morally reprehensible or wrong in enslaving other people, for instance, or even colonizing other people. They just say those are facts of history, that was legal, that was then. It doesn't have much to do with us now, and not recognize the continuities and the legacies. And I think that is the difficulty that continues to remain. But I think it will continue, and in the last year, there has definitely been an increased sensitivity to the need for that kind of dialogue. So it's a work in progress. Prayer, some of us might not live to see the full outcome of it, but we have to continue the struggle of reconciliation. Reconciliation is never easy between anybody when there is real hurt, pain, and aggrievement. And in a one-on-one relationship, much less internationally, never easy, but it is possible. And people have to take responsibility on either side and work towards building. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Stephen. And I know of much of your works in the international sphere on this reparations matter and with church organizations as well. So it's very interesting to me already that the discussion has sparked the question of justice generally, liberation and reparation, but at the various levels, individual, community, national, and international. And I trust that when we continue the discussion, other of our panelists will help us to see that the reparations issue is not really just about any one level, but that the justice issues are at many different levels of people's life together. So we look forward to some more engagement with some other audience members towards the end of this panel. At this point, we hear from Mrs. Beverly Johnson. She brings to us the perspective as a Caribbean person growing up in a troubled community and being able to become a resounding success, able to succeed as a businesswoman in Jamaica and in the UK. Mrs. Johnson is a successful executive with over 35 years of experience in international trade and shipping and logistics and marketing. And she has worked at the managerial level and in ownership capacity in many spheres of transportation integration across the globe. She is the owner and CEO and managing director of JLB International Limited and a trainer in international logistics and trade agreements at the Management Institute for National Development, MIND, in Jamaica. Let's welcome Mrs. Johnson as she brings us the perspective of a strong Jamaican woman coming out of troubled community circumstances and into success in business, both locally and internationally. Welcome.
Good day, everyone. Good day. I greet you all protocols observed.
Yes.
I particularly want to speak today about the single mother. I came out of what you might consider a troubled communities, the communities in Jamaica of Maxfield Park, Maxfield Avenue, Rosedown, Walton Park Road, etc. But I came through, and today I am a success story. And so I hope that my presentation in the next 7 minutes will speak to the heart of a single mother somewhere in the world who asks these questions: how can I get my children and myself out of this state? I look back at my mother, a loving yet firm woman, extremely God-fearing, very resilient and focused, strategic and driven, and I must say she was very proud. And she taught us, and I'm the baby of 6 children, but she taught us some values. So though my father was not in the picture in my early years growing up in the communities, my mother and the community nurtured me, nurtured my mindset, and she demonstrated what was required. First, she would say to us, I work hard. I put a roof over your head, there's meals on the table. And I'll tell you this, if my sister is online and listening, we laugh now because it's fun. We thought that fried eggs and fried plantains was the best meal in the world. But those were what we had. But my mom had strong Christian morals and she led by examples. And back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a child was not reared only by their parent, a single mother, but we were reared by a community. What we're seeing now, however, in society is that that great network has escaped us, and it is something that we must draw back on in order for our young people to realize that if they're not able to make it, there is somebody standing there in the gap. The landlords of my mother, because my mother lived in a tenement situation, but the landlords were like mothers to us, and that was very important. Community meant community. Community meant families. So the first thing I want to encourage us to do is that we must believe that Jamaica can be regenerated. We must believe that there is a corner that we must turn and take hold of our beautiful island home, Jamaica. I see today in our society a lack of strong parenting. My mother's perspective was that you must do well in school in order for you to take me away from this troubled community, AKA the ghetto. So we understood quite early that we had to be focused, we had to be driven, we had to work hard in school in order to take her away from this environment, which for whatever reason or circumstance brought her there. And the next fact that was strong for us is that even the days we had no lunch monies, we could still go to school, because she insisted, even if we had to walk to school. And that environment for us was a respite. We were able to somehow get the lunch that was offered through the government programs at the time. So you were sure to have a meal if you went to school. I'm not sure if those things are happening now, but that's what happened for me. So I used to love to go to school. Was I going for learning? Maybe not. I was probably just going so that I could get a meal. But in the classrooms of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we found more teachers became a part of the life of a student. Once you saw a child with possibilities, that teacher would hold fast to that child. And also, back in those days, the teachers would have taken the time to meet with the parents to have an understanding as to why is this child going through the process. We have missed those things today in society. I came through because my mother's landlord, when I left school, high school, my mother could not find the funds to send me to college or to university. So I started looking for jobs. And I remember my mother wanted me to go and work in a factory, even though I just graduated from high school with all my subjects. But in those days, she just wanted the first thing that came so that you could have your own source of income. But someone stood in the gap. I remember Mrs. Robinson, who was then the landlord of the property we were living in. She says, Miss Rosie, no way. Beverly's too bright to be working in a factory. Just be patient. Just be patient. Something good will come. And in no time, something good came. And so I was able to work in the pharmacy. I was able to pay my way through college in the evenings and got myself qualified. All I'm saying to another mother who is there, remember this, through all my years of coming up in the ghetto, in those communities, we never felt as though we were a part of the problem. We felt we were a part of the solution. My mom never quarreled, never cursed, never swore. And also, she never spoke badly about my father, even though he was missing. I didn't even know he existed because he just wasn't a part of the process. What was more important to her was my daughters need to get out, and so they need to get qualified. Qualification, education, what we're talking about. But I want to stress that we all don't learn the same way. And I think the structured programs of teaching now could be one of the reasons that we're seeing so many failures. Not every child is academically inclined. And some people will learn from book knowledge, some people learn from imagery, some people learn from skills. We just have to find the right approach as to whether a child should go to an academic school or a skill training school, but at least give that child the opportunity for learning. So I came through, and I came through because I was curious. I was so curious about every opportunity. The job I landed in shipping was actually not mine. So I tell you, when God has a plan for you, there is a perfect plan. My sister went to do that job interview, and the remuneration they were offering was far too low. And she came home and she said to my mother, send her. I thank her every day for those 3 words, send her to it. Because today I got into shipping. I went to every short programs, modules, teaching that was available. Can I tell a young person today, don't worry about not getting into universities, but every opportunity that you get in life, learn it to the best of your ability. Today, I am proud to say I'm a successful business person. I today teach shipping for the United Nations across the English-speaking Caribbean. Today, I'm a facilitator for JAMPRO. I teach shipping right across the world because I was focused, because I was driven. And another thing I want to tell us, open our eyes. We should see what God is showing us. All of the businesses that I own today, and in the total there is 5, and it spans through the Caribbean, North America, the United Kingdom, and primarily Jamaica, where the head office is. They came out of a need. I create business opportunities because I have a need. So if I have a need and there is no solution for the first 2 to 3 attempts, I seek and research what's going on here. Can I start this business? And that has been my success story. Do you have a lack? Are you not able to fill that lack? Could this be a business opportunity for you? Then think about it. Do your research, find out what's going on, find out the possibility of those other persons who need this service or product that you would need, and start your businesses. But on the point, a lot of us have been talking about education. Growing up in those troubled communities, what I think was lacking and is still lacking today in our communities, whether Jamaica or elsewhere, is community regeneration. Too many of our children are living in squalors. Squalors are not the place to grow children. Governments and stakeholders need to have partnerships which allow for community regeneration. Those regenerations will bring about uplifting communities, bringing industries, having health services, creating social platforms for children to engage in and to have security. And more important is to have business incubators for those persons who will never be doctors, lawyers, Indians, or chiefs, but they can be successful businessmen. I also think that the government of Jamaica, stakeholders, and successful business people should begin to engage our youths. We have taken the journey. Stop. Take a look behind you and take a child with you on your next step. We can do this. I remember as a child, my mother would send me off to the countryside every single time we had a summer break. Shifting our children's environment will make them think differently. I went into an environment in the countryside where people were living freely, they were qualified, they were doing well, and all I did was to aspire to be like a cousin or aspire to be like an uncle. So remember, it's important to shift your child's environment if you're in a negative situation. Another recommendation I would like to offer is that of getting those idle hands to those idle lands. Agriculture is our way forward. Why don't we get back to the days when we had allotments in schools from an early age so that persons would be interested in agriculture? I thank you for the opportunity you have given me today to make this presentation, and I make myself available for any questions you might have. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you very much for striking a very strong note, very hopeful note from your own life experience. And, you know, as a strong Jamaican woman, you have in this Women's History Month really focused my thoughts anyway on both your own life as strength of a woman, but you helped us also with that single mother of yours, that also strong woman who in her own situation pointed to a kind of different future. I heard you saying that she instilled in you that this is where we're starting from, but this is not where we have got to end. I'm sure that others are going to engage you on some of your own experience and what you would be suggesting to us for learning for ourselves and for our communities. But we're going to take the other two panelists and then give an opportunity for further interaction. How delighted are we this morning to have in our midst Professor Emeritus Rupert Lewis. He brings to us this perspective, building resilience among Caribbean people who have experienced the legacy of slavery and colonialization from the perspective of Black leaders such as Marcus Garvey. And who better to do this? Of course, Professor Lewis is Professor of Political Thought, has worked for decades. He will allow me if I even say generations, since as a beneficiary of his teaching from the very early years. He has worked in the University of the West Indies and is a research fellow in the P.J. Patterson Center for Africa Caribbean Advocacy. He's the Garvey scholar, and he comes to us with a spirit of Caribbean radicalism in the 20th century and in the 21st century in which we are now living. He's here helping to guide us as to what can we learn from what great thinkers have said in the past, and which we should be more open to learn from. He's, of course, a member of Jamaica's National Council on Reparations, and we are delighted to welcome Professor Emeritus Rupert Lewis.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Gordon Cowans, and I'd like to also thank the previous panelists for their insightful comments and practical recommendations, particularly my colleague on the village system, free village system in Jamaica, and the land question, which was touched on by the last speaker. And there was a report on television only this week about a group of farmers in a cooperative who had been able to get land and to develop their cooperative. And if you saw their faces and you saw how they approached this this decision of government, it
Yes.
couldn't help but melt your heart. And the last presenter, Mrs. Beverly Johnson, spoke about the land question, agriculture. So I want to begin by saying that one of the concepts that we need to bear in mind when dealing with the decolonizing education and the challenges for reparation is the concept of unjust enrichment. Whilst I admire the individual resilience, we have to combine individual resilience with collective resilience. And this is what Garvey allowed us to understand, that it is in the collective organization of our people across borders. It is the internationalization of our efforts that we are able to arrive at collective resilience. The concept of an unjust enrichment from slavery and colonialism has allowed Britain, Europe, and the United States to build some of the world's best educational institutions, insurance companies, banking companies, and a whole range of institutions that have allowed for the empowerment of white people and the disempowerment of Black people. We are now much better informed about what Eric Williams wrote over 50 years ago in Capitalism and Slavery. We appreciate the work of Hilary Beckles, his book, Britain's Black Debt. And in the United States, the work of the economist William Darity, a recent book, 2021, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. Unjust enrichment has to be a cornerstone of our thinking with respect to our history. We can't escape that idea, that notion, because it is at the basis of the inadequate resource allocation that we have inherited. There's an example, and I think there's a paper that will be dealing with the traditional knowledge. And I want us to pay attention in our discussion on education to the knowledge systems that Africans brought to this part of the world, the Americas. And in the United States recently, there was reference to an enslaved African in Massachusetts named Onesimus, who in 1716 informed his owner of the method of curing smallpox that came out of West African practices. And that was the first vaccination, so to speak. There's therefore a long tradition of knowledge systems in Africa that need to be part of our education. The agricultural plantation systems benefited from the knowledge that enslaved Africans brought here from their lands in West Central Africa in particular. At the same time that we harness traditional knowledge systems, we must obviously have access to modern scientific and technological knowledge. I am for science, technology, engineering, math, STEM, but it has to be conjoined with music, the arts, knowledge of self, and the affirmation of our humanity. In the words of Jamaica's poet laureate, Olive Sr., Black Lives Matter is something said that shouldn't need to be said. The educational system we have sought to build in the Caribbean in the post-independence years is in stark contrast to the shameless system of exclusion of the majority from the classroom, especially after primary school, and the giving of one island scholarship tenable at a university in England. The late Derek Gordon, UWI sociologist, in a study of access to high school education from 1936 to 1975 in Jamaica, found the continued racial advantage of light-skinned Jamaican children throughout those years. And I dare say contemporary research will confirm the imbalance in terms of class access and color access to the best schools. So therefore, notwithstanding the improvements that we have made, there is a class bias in the educational system. One of the things about transformation is that in the Caribbean, it is the social movements such as the Garvey movement of the 1920s, 30s, and so on, that have been able to bring about transformation. Collective resilience requires the mobilization of people on the ground. COVID-19 has forced the educational system into blended methodologies, which link online with face-to-face. 16 years ago, the late Dr. Donna McFarlane developed the Marcus Garvey Multimedia Museum with touchscreen technology. For years, advocates had called for the teaching of Garvey in schools, but many saw that teaching through one-dimensional textbook technology. Thousands of Jamaican children in the pre-COVID era visited the Multimedia Museum and the self-identity and contemporary Africa video streams that she and her team created. Accompanying this was a library that brought together work on Garvey, Pan-Africanism, and Africa. This project now forms part of the Institute of Jamaica. Dr. Donna Akila Wright, Associate Professor at Medgar Evers College, City University of New York, has written an essay entitled Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Implications for a Liberatory Educational Approach, Curriculum and Pedagogy, in the current issue of the journal 76 King Street. Developing a pedagogy based on Garvey's intellectual legacy breaks new conceptual terrain and joins the multidisciplinary work being done by filmmakers, writers for musicals, comics, and social media. I therefore see the teaching of Garvey in schools as fully utilizing modern technology. And one of the things that Dr. Donna McFarlane discovered was the high level of self-deprecatory views that children in the downtown area had about themselves, how they looked, their Blackness, and how primitive were their views of the African continent. And therefore she addressed those questions. And I think it is up to us in the educational system in the Caribbean to speak to those issues at the same time that we're doing our mathematics, we're doing our physics, we're doing our social studies, because the last presenter, Mrs. Beverly Johnson, stressed how important it is for you to have mentorship that encourages you. And this is what Dr. Donna McFarlane tried to do. The Caribbean is a multiracial, we're multiracial communities. And therefore in territories like Trinidad and Guyana and Suriname, we have to be mindful of other groups, other peoples that exist, and how best we can organize our living together in community. And therefore, the issue in the Caribbean is not only a Black issue, but it's also the issue of our relationship with other peoples. Let me end here. I have ended my 7 minutes, but I just want to conclude that the international dimension of education is one of the things that I'm working on in the PJ Patterson Center for Africa Caribbean, encouraging relationships between tertiary education, largely university level, so that when the world now exists and technology that we have access to allows for multi-regional curricula. We were drawing from the experience of other countries. For example, people need to be aware that Brazil, with its 90 million people of African descent, is an important arena for us to begin to establish linkages with respect to how we reshape the global system, without which that reshaping, no amount of national effort can overcome the global systems in which we are currently entrapped. You just have to look at the allocation of the COVID-19 vaccines to understand the global system today. So whilst, and this by no means ignores the importance of the national mobilization, the very wonderful presentation that started the discussion about family, about coming out of prison, the initiatives that have been taken and suggested by Mrs. Johnson. But you have to combine that now, the individual with the collective resilience. Thank you very much.
Oh, but thank you, Professor, and thank you for really drawing together so many of the thoughts. I think that this is what is running in people's minds too, about how do we move from where we are to another place. And you have certainly helped us to see the tension that must be, in which we must hold the matters of individual resilience of individual nations or even communities, and also how it fits into a global picture. So we are hearing you, I am certainly hearing you clearly on the matter of unjust enrichment and how the reparations movement must continue its work, and to see how the opportunities for the future can break through, reminding ourselves that we didn't come here as empty vessels, and that matter of the African knowledge systems, which I think really, well, we must have a whole conference on that. But thank you so much, Prof, and hopefully others will engage you when we get the opportunity at the close of the presentation from all our panelists. So in that vein, allow me to warmly welcome Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling, who speaks to us on the perspective. Her presentation is entitled Secrets of Success, From the Margin to the Center. Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling is a retired senior lecturer in the Behavioral Science and General Management Unit at the Mona School of Business and Management at the University of the West Indies here in Mona. And she has taught a range of subject matters in development and management and pastoral care. And she has been trained both overseas in her training and also in places where she has worked, Johns Hopkins University, USA, and in the University of Birmingham. And she has maintained her concern for issues of migration and mental health, in particular of our Caribbean people in places in the Caribbean diaspora. She has worked as a management consultant in public and private sector areas and as a psychologist in Jamaica and in the UK and New Zealand. She's deeply passionate about the development of our people and brings this perspective to help us with the balancing act of resilience at the international, national, and community, even individual level. Warmest welcome, Dr. Hickling.
Thank you so much. I congratulate the organizers, and I'm going to stick to the time and just want to share the objectives that I put together. They are to identify the fact that many people do not realize that they have been successful
because of the way in which we define success. Secondly, I'm going to be giving 3 case studies which look both locally and internationally. And then I want to look at how we look at success and how it helps to move people from the margins to the center. I will draw briefly on what has been said by the previous speakers, because I think those are some critical issues. Now, fortunately, I did not only work in the University of the West Indies and with another program with Georgetown University in Washington, but I have had the opportunity of working widely, which allows me to have an understanding of how knowledge generated in the academy and knowledge generated in the community and elsewhere have to, in fact, link together. We don't operate in silos, we are operating across boundaries. That's one thing. 2, the matter of the secrets of success, which came out of some work that I did with a scholarship program back in the 1990s. It was 25 scholarships from Jamaica, which were part of 250 scholarships from Central America and the Caribbean, funded by USAID. And when we did, we had to send forms out each year to 250 schools, and then we did a final calling, and we came down to 25 people. And when I posed it in the panel to the would-be scholarship winner, so what is the secret of your success? He looked around the room like, me? Are you talking to me? And I think that is now part of the thing that we need to look at. How do we determine on what success is? Our previous speaker spoke about her experience. And so we need to look at and help people to identify their levels of skills, the things that they can do. Sometimes they've not had opportunities to do things, but they have the ability to do that. And so briefly, with these students, we identified 6 things. And there's a PowerPoint which I set in. I will just describe some of the points that they said caused them to be successful. And enduring faith in God to see them through tribulation and make their dreams come true. So people need to be dreaming, and tribulations have been part of the development of our society and our societies across this Caribbean. A desire to make a difference in their families and be the first person sometimes to go to college, to go to university, to set up a business, confidence in themselves. And so that has been a whole issue of how do we deal with internalized racism? How is it that we think we are ugly and black and stupid and we won't come to anything and nobody will love us? And a whole kind of thing. And if, I have to bleach my skin in order to make it. A strong connection with their home and family and country is another one of the things that they said. And a desire to learn new things and to be critical. One of the most important things that came as a result of this was that the organization that was Georgetown University, which was managing this program for USAID, adopted it throughout Central America and Caribbean as a question which was used for this process of selection. And so I feel very positive that whenever I have any discussions with people, I say, so what are the secrets of your success? So that's the first thing. So who are the 3 people I'm going to identify in my very mini case study? The first person I want to talk about is Professor Jeffrey Palmer, who is a professor emeritus at Heriot-Watt University, born in St. Elizabeth, grew up in Allentown. And in a discussion some time ago, someone said, so you went to Wolmer's? And he said, no, I could only stand at the gate and look inside. So part of what we're looking at in terms of moving from margin to center is the extent to which many of the people of our society and elsewhere are outside of either the family Mr. Robinson talked about, where he said he was an outside child, or the person who is outside the gate looking in. Part of it is that we do not think we belong, because that's a very important part of it. I don't have a sense of being part of this community or anything like that. And so he went, one of the things that he could do when he migrated to England at age 15, after having completed school in Jamaica, was that he played cricket in Britain. And you can read much more about him because the information that I chose for these mini case studies is in the public domain. But I also had some relationships with at least the other two of the people who I'm going to mention in the case study. So Jeffrey Palmer went to Heriot-Watt University, where he's now 80 years old or more, and he helped to identify some particular process for brewing. And I don't want to waste time now to share the PowerPoint. You can look at it after, because I'm not too techy, unfortunately. So, right. Oh, fabulous. Fantastic. Wonderful. Yes. All right. So, wow. Better than me. So, we'll click and go down. All right. So these are the things that we looked at in terms of this. I will keep talking. So these three people that I have identified, so that was Jeffrey Palmer. What is he doing now at over age 80? He is an advocate for looking at the issue of Scottish engagement in slavery and the extent to which people are going to be able to repair this relationship of history. I'm watching the time. Okay, so that's Jeffrey Palmer. He was at the gate at Woolman's, he could only look in. He's gone to Scotland, where he has spent his time, and he has been writing books and he has been advocating for reparations. Secondly, I want to use Shelley Ann Fraser-Price, who is, of course, of a completely different era. She's from Waterhouse, which we know is another one of those tough communities, and she attended primary school in Duhaney Park, and then Woolman's Girls' School, which provided her a tremendous level of support subsequent to her going to the University of Technology. Her athletics and academics were the secrets of her success, her faith in God, her belief in self. How did I learn about this? Some of this is in the public domain, but also she was invited to my class at the University of the West Indies. And I'm asking that we try to link knowledge from outside of the academy and inside of the academy. We're not only studying people, but people are studying us. And we need to find ways of having a safe place to have a conversation. So Shelley Ann came to speak the year after she went to the Olympics. I won't go into the details, but I will just give one example of this business about resilience, which is the ability to overcome adversity. So not only is there poverty and the problems operating in that community, but Shelley Ann said she had to have surgery. This is all in the public domain. And she said she had to have surgery, which would to have her appendix removed. So there were two possible ways she could do it. One that would take 6 weeks for recovery and a shorter term one. And she said she took the shorter term and more expensive route. After 2 weeks, she said, her coach said, you have to get to the track and start running. She said the pain was just ridiculous, but she did it. And subsequently, her life has been able to demonstrate to the people in her community, which she has given back, and to the world, that someone like her can make a difference to herself, her community, and her country. So this resilience is about not only me and I, but my community and my country. And she has made an impact on the entire world. I think the last thing that she has done is show that motherhood and successful athletics are possible. She's a dedicated family woman, and she is a dedicated wife and mother. And finally, I want to talk about Jerome Waite, who is from Arnett Gardens, another Woolmerian, and someone who has done his work as a sportsman and as a coach. He has helped to raise the profile and the performance of teams in his community and the national team and Constant Spring. And he also came to my class at UWI to talk to the students. One of the points I wanted to make to the students was, knowledge does not only exist in the academy. that knowledge exists in many places. And I think that's one of the important things that the transformational research is doing. The sources of knowledge are many and varied. And so we need to therefore make use of them. I think I am running out of time. So in closing, I want to say that resilience comes because we recognize that at the individual level, at the collective level, at the national level, that we can change things. We have to change the culture. We have to look at issues like belonging and self-confidence and achievement and partnership and mentorship. We have to look at how institutions like schools and churches and universities and business places can help. But we also have to recognize that people indeed can make a difference, because it is the mental, it is the belief in self, it is the belief and perseverance and persistence which makes things possible. I will end on that note.
And thank you so much for that engaging presentation, Dr. Hickling, that focused so much on real individual people, and some of whom, as you call their names, we know them, and even those we do not know, but having a deep sense of how success, resilience is already to be found in us. I think that's a core of a comment that I'm receiving from what you have said, that perhaps we really do need to sit back and get a keener sense of how to define our own success. That we are is a sign of significant success as nation, as many communities, and certainly as individual people. And so this interplay between how peoples from a challenging background can be brought into a different and more hopeful space is what I think has been the dominant thread through this panel. I think the great power of a opportunity like this is how it has drawn these thoughts together. And many questions coming through the chat, but unfortunately we are not going to be able to speak them now. I'm going to just encourage the audience to continue the discussion in the chat, and our panelists are going to be very keen to continue to engage you, and I hope some of the work will be continuing in the breakout rooms. But many thanks to every one of the panelists who have really brought together what the thought and the theme of this conference could be. How do we move forward while recognizing, not at all ignoring our history, but in fact looking for the lessons and the guidance from our history. Thank you all, to each and every panelist. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
And thank you.